Intro. Welcome back.
Hi.
It's been a little while.
A little bit, couple weeks. Most of January.
Most of January. Yeah, been a little bit. So we're back, Kate.
Ta-da.
And
Andee.
Gutsy
Andee, hello.
Here to talk, hopefully a shorter one, but something that I see coming up a lot in like IBS support groups, and there's a lot more marketing for this now. And like anything, I feel like companies are jumping on the bandwagon to try to get their fill. Whether or not they mean to be doing a subpar job, I don't know. If it's ignorance or greed, I don't know. So we wanted to talk today about different types of food sensitivity tests.
Yes.
And why they're not equal. They are not all the same.
They are not all created equal.
So just kind of first little reminder, there is a big difference between a food intolerance that is related to like digestive enzymes usually, food allergies, and food sensitivities. So food allergies and sensitivities are based on the immune system, but allergies are like that
immediate response.
Immediate response. There are things you usually know if you have an allergy. Break out in rashes, hives, airway constricts, you know, like people think of like shellfish and peanuts.
Get it, yep.
Yeah. So
all of the things that you don't want that would ultimately result in an EpiPen and or an ER trip, we're not in that realm.
Yeah, not going to talk about that. So we're going to talk about the other types of food sensitivity tests. So do you want to explain kind of how food sensitivity tests work in a general sense? What they're doing? Are you familiar? I know this is,
so they are actually, they are testing. I'm not
sure how much you
yes.
Up on
so based upon my experience, I did the MRT. They're actually testing your blood to look at its reactivity to the foods you have eaten. So rather than looking at tissues or other, types of meteors, are actually measuring from blood samples that have been exposed to the different food substances.
Yes. So I've got I'm going to attempt to pull a whiteboard up here. This is like so
first time, guys. First time.
This is like, I don't have the fancy digital thing to do like a tablet whiteboard here on a screen share. You are getting the whiteboard I use for my workout groups.
Yep. And boy, does she like that whiteboard.
I love my whiteboard.
Hey, are you kidding me? I can't wait to get my whiteboards hung up.
I need a bulletin board soon too. Okay.
Oh, I've already got those too. A little higher. There you go.
It's sliding.
Nope. Washed out.
Washed out. And I also need
there you
go. To block it. It was doing so well when I was first showing it to you.
It was.
I don't know why it's sliding.
I think you need to slide your chair in.
There
you go. That's a little better.
I can hold it. All
there
right.
you go. Do that.
So, thanks, guys. I'm headless right now, but I'll come down in a second here. Someday I'll get my technology up. I'm not a tech person. I'm a science person. What can I say? So the idea being, if you imagine your immune system kind of like a tree, that's what we're doing here. So your whole immune system has different ways it can kind of work in your system, different pathways that it can work.
There are different immune pathways. And
we'll just
IgE,
we'll go down here. Here's your IgE.
That's the allergy one, and we're not going to talk about that.
So that's like this little short thing. That's aside. We're not worried about that one too much.
That's allergies.
Allergies. So food sensitivities. So one of the very common ones I see, and I'm not going to name companies, but there are a lot that do IgG and sometimes like an IgG4. This is a very common test. It's cheap because it's small. So what they're doing, any of these tests, essentially, they're taking the food, like Andee was saying, they're taking the food and your blood and they're challenging it and they're measuring the reaction. So with IgG tests, they are measuring the reaction through essentially this pathway or this bridge. So it might release some what we call mediators, bits of your immune system going, not so happy, let's attack. But what's one of the other problems with IgGs?
Only one?
Just the main one. The main problem with food sensitivity testing and IgG.
Oh, gee. Well, if you have any type of infectious process that you're recovering from, it's going to be elevated. Or if you have any type of inflammatory process, you'll have some bleed over.
So there's that. And then also that IgG is measuring memory. Like
correct. Yes. IgG measures memory. So yes, IgG is looking at the response. So if something is similar or it's something that you've had before, it's going to respond to that memory of the exposure.
Yeah. So one of the problems with IgG is that you might get false positives. And I've had people say this, they're like, oh my gosh, everything I've been eating showed up as positive on my IgG. Okay, you can try taking it out and seeing, but there are these common false positives because it's not your body going, oh, I don't like you. It's going, hey, I recognize you.
Oh, I remember you. Yep. Hey, I remember you.
So that's one of the problems. The other, and this is what we'll see with anything, as we go through these other pathways, it's missing other potential things. So you might get something, it's like, hey, we did not see a reaction through this pathway. You're safe.
Yeah.
There would have been a reaction through another branch and we didn't see it. So we also have a lot of IgA. That's another immune pathway.
Yep.
IgM, histamine. So there's all these different branches. So the problem with some food sensitivity tests, there's also some that just do IgA and IgG. So they're getting more.
But still not all, yeah.
So this is why I prefer the Mediator Release test, because it's not measuring through specific branches. It's coming from outside and going.
It's looking at the whole cloud.
And we want to measure all white blood cell responses, no matter the branch, no matter the pathway. We want it all. We don't care where it came from. We're looking at the end result.
Yep. It's looking at it's looking at the whole tree as opposed to just one branch and one set of leaves.
Yeah. So hopefully that kind of helps explain. So
perfect.
It's always important if you're looking at tests. Unfortunately, the fewer branches it's measuring, it does get cheaper. So if you're not super sick and you're just like, hey, maybe I want to boost it, you could try something like this, but there are going to be the higher risk of false positives, missed positives, false positives, and we want the whole sweep. So that's why I use this one. It's got the best results that I've seen, the fewest mistakes. Nothing's 100%. We still have to tailor because there can be other things that your body doesn't like about a food, but closest one I've seen. So that's one thing to be aware of.
Yes, and it's going to get all of those mediators.
MRT, Mediator Release Test. It is looking at all mediators released. So I hope the visual helped.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think it was a very nice tree.
Oh, well, thank you.
A very nice immune system tree.
So, and then the other thing that comes up sometimes is how many foods are being tested.
Yep, that's a good question.
And then we won't get into this, the third thing, but the third thing is also the protocol, because sometimes they're like, oh, just avoid the foods that you're sensitive to. The end. No good.
I was gonna say that's another conversation for another time. That's another
conversation about the protocol through going, but just when it comes to the test, it's important to get the MRT. Hands down, it's the best one I'm aware of. But yeah, when it comes to numbers and quantities, that's another problem area I've seen. One place I worked, they were doing a food sensitivity test, and it basically, it blew my mind. I didn't even understand why they were doing it because they'd had a decent one. It wasn't great, but it was decent. And then they switched and started doing one where they basically tested like 10 to 20 foods. They're like, these are the common things, you know, nuts, fish,
eggs,
dairy, soy, eggs, gluten. And then that was it. So you
sorry, that was my like involuntary titter. That was terrible. Like, are you kidding me? They could miss so much.
Like it blew my mind because this place was so based on science and so many other things, and I'd always been so impressed. And then they picked like the worst food sensitivity test I'd ever seen. And so essentially, yeah, if you think about it, there's like 3,000 foods in a supermarket on average, something like that. I forget the number. There's so many like fruits, vegetables, herbs, spices, meats, proteins, dairy, like all this stuff. And if they only tell you, well, out of these 20 things, you have one sensitivity. What about all those other things that did not get tested?
Right. Says the woman who was told, who wound up needing to eat a mung bean, rainbow trout, and butternut squash diet for a month. So, but that's the case. I mean, and God, I felt freaking great within a week.
Yeah, so it's really important to get as big a range as you can, because we not only need to see what are you reactive to that we do need to eliminate, we need to test and find out what you're safe eating. What has the least amount of mediators released, the fewest inflammatory agents released, the fewest histamine, cytokines,
because it's not a binary of yes, there were some, no, there weren't. There's a whole spectrum of, wow, you released a ton, or you released a bunch, or you released some, or hey, guess what? You ate that. I mean, there was no response. Said mango, mung bean, and rainbow trout and butternut squash.
You had a few more things, but yeah, that definitely was a crux. So yes, it's important to make sure you get something that has a substantial size. I actually was just talking with someone recently who said she'd done a test and it had about 80 foods on it. And so one of her complaints, she's like, it tested spinach and iceberg, but it didn't test any other greens. But I wasn't allowed to eat spinach anymore. But I wanted salad, but it didn't test.
But I didn't know
chard, lettuce, romaine, like nothing else. Right. So it's important that you're going to get put on a fairly restricted diet based on the results of a food sensitivity test. Like that just is the starting point usually. That's going to be the best starting point. You go to the things you know. So the bigger your pool of foods is at the beginning, the more variety you're going to have. The more ability you are going to have good variety to allow for better nutrients and antioxidants and protein sources and less risk of super restricted.
Yep. And you do things like find out that pretty much everything that you'd been eating, including things like spices or, medications or chemicals in foods like dyes or chemicals that are dyes that are in medications, you find out that those things can be problematic too if you do a more complex test.
Yeah, because one of the first people I worked with actually was my sister when I was learning this whole system way back, because she had some migraine issues, and she's like, every time I try to be healthier, I actually feel worse. And her version of being healthy was to try to have she'd do like a vegetable omelet for breakfast, a kale salad for lunch, and like chicken something and vegetable for dinner. And it turns out some of her top triggers were eggs, chicken, and kale. So until we knew that, you know, we weren't able to see progress. So I've had a lot of people who come and they're like, oh, I've done like the Whole30, or I've done gluten-free, or I'm doing AIP. And again, without that, it's for some people that's enough. But if it's not, that personalization matters. Getting a big pool. And then, kind of as you mentioned, the other thing that I think is really important, that there might be some food sensitivity tests that do this, but I'm not aware of many, but the chemicals, like you mentioned. Yeah. So MRT also includes a handful of chemicals such as MSG. Some people have acetaminophen or ibuprofen. So if you're taking a pain medication to help with whatever you're struggling with, it might be exacerbating it. Red dye, blue dye, green dye, those kind of things. So that's something else that gets missed a lot, because what was it, dog food that you found out was?
Yeah, dog food was I kept getting gluten exposure, and we couldn't figure out where the heck it was coming from. And it turned out it was coming, I'm scooping the dog food. I am reaching my hand into the dog food container, grabbing 2 scoops, but that was enough for me.
For your cross-reactivity. Yeah. Yep. And so that's something else I encourage. If you are doing a food sensitivity test, Again, I'd love to help you. Reach out if you want to work with me. I can talk you through my system. But even if you're working with somebody else, it's important to go, what is this measuring? Is it more than just IgG, IgA, IgG4? How many foods is it testing? How big is it? Is it going to tell me what I'm sensitive to only, or will it also tell me what can be tested and proven as safe for me? What is the process you're going to take me through? Because again, you should never be restricted for life. There should be some long game plan to help heal your gut and heal whatever it was that caused the food sensitivities in the first place. And then ask, are you going to help me dig into non-food sources? So being there with you week to week, checking that food log, checking your symptoms and going, okay, well, did you have a reactivity to mint? Hey, what's in your toothpaste? Do you have issues with blue dye number 5? And I had one guy, it was his deodorant, turns out.
Yep.
So make sure you're also being aware of chemicals can trigger these. Yep. We call them food sensitivities, but they're chemical sensitivities, but it's the same idea. Your immune system is having this delayed reaction, not happy with what's going on.
Yep.
So hopefully it's kind of short and sweet, explains the different types of food sensitivity tests and some of the things that I strongly, strongly encourage you look into and ask about with anyone that you're going to work with food sensitivities. So I think that's about it. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add, Andee?
Test, don't guess. It's completely worth it. I mean, the week before I did my testing, I felt like death, and I was eating healthy and doing a cayenne homemade aioli with olive oil and, like chicken, spinach, and all of the good healthy. And I got my results back and it was like, oh, you just spent the entire last week eating everything on this list. No wonder you feel like hell.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was great to be able to concretely know that not only can I not eat these things, I need to be eating these things. And test, don't guess.
Yeah, test, don't guess. And really,
the more information you can get, the better.
Yeah, and I encourage this for really almost anybody, because whatever the official diagnosis is, so many protocols, like the science is finally catching up to what I've been trying to do. But like, if you look at what is the protocol for H. pylori, like diet and inflammation is step 1 before you even treat the H. pylori. Hashimoto's, before you even address the thyroid and start, tackling that.
Number one starting place, diet and inflammation.
Yeah, the food sensitivities, heal the gut lining, calm the inflammation, and then start to move forward step by step. Yep. There are protocols in place that have the best success rates, and they start with your diet and like lifestyle, stress management, and things like that. These are like the top 2 things. So yes, I do encourage, whether you're dealing with thyroid issues, autoimmune, IBS, even just like athletic performance and energy, like it just.
Yep. It starts with stress and gut. And they're like inextricably linked. You cannot separate stress and gut.
Yeah.
Diet.
So that's it for today. Kind of short one. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, let us know if you have any questions. Reach out.
Please do.
Happy to talk about other topics.
Yeah. We'll catch you next time, gang.
Have a good one.
Bye.